Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're anything like us, you've probably noticed the world isn't just moving fast anymore. It feels like a total blur.
Yeah, it's more than just speed, isn't it? It's this sense of constant systemic instability.
Exactly. We aren't just accelerating. Things feel fundamentally unsteady.
And that whole idea of traditional stability, the predictable career path, the steady market, it feels like, well, mostly a myth now.
A comforting myth, maybe, but not really helpful.
Right. Just think about the pace of the last, say, 5 years alone. AI explodes onto the scene, geopolitical situations shift dramatically, economic certainties seem to evaporate.
It's a lot. These aren't just blips on the radar anymore.
No, this feels like the new standard operating procedure, this constant flux.
So here's the big question we want to explore today, really get into for you. Are you finding yourself just reacting all the time? Playing catch-up after the wave hits?
Spending all your energy just trying to keep your head above water.
Or is there a way to actively prepare, to anticipate? We're looking for that path, maybe even, a shortcut to not just get by, but actually thrive in all this change.
And we think that path really is adaptive thinking. We've been digging into the research, and it's clear this isn't just some nice-to-have soft skill.
No, it's more fundamental.
It's a core cognitive capability, the formal definition. Something like the ability to recognize unexpected situations, quickly consider various possible responses, and decide on the best one.
Okay, so it's not just sitting back and letting things happen.
Definitely not. It's proactive. It's about strategic pivoting, not just passive acceptance, making conscious choices.
People often confuse it with just being flexible, right? Like,
Ah.
oh, I can change my schedule.
Yeah, and flexibility is part of it, but adaptive thinking goes much, much deeper. So our mission today is really to unpack that. What are the cognitive strategies, the mental models, and maybe most importantly, the practical tools you can use every day to build that mental agility?
Right, to make adaptive thinking less of an effort and more of your default way of operating. Okay, let's start with why this is so critical right now, especially thinking about careers and the job market.
The urgency is palpable.
Yeah, experts seem to agree we're in this massive transformation window, maybe the next 10, 20, 30 years, where AI is going to fundamentally reshape most jobs.
It's not just about tweaking tasks, it's reconfiguration. We really need to internalize this idea that job security isn't just about what you know anymore.
It's more about how fast you can learn something new.
And apply it effectively, yeah. By 2050, some estimates are suggesting, 60% of current jobs, they'll need significant adaptation because of AI integration.
60%, that's huge.
It is. And this isn't just academic speculation. You hear leaders in tech, in finance, they're saying openly this restructuring, especially in white-collar roles, it's happening now.
And you can already see where the pressure points are, right? The vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. Think about roles that are highly repetitive, very process-driven.
Like data entry.
Yeah.
Or maybe routine insurance claims.
Exactly. Or even some basic legal research paralegals do. Anything that relies heavily on recognizing established patterns for standard outputs.
I think I saw a stat somewhere like 60% of administrative tasks could potentially be automated.
That sounds about right. Take the legal example. AI can now sift through thousands of documents, cross-reference case law in minutes, tasks that used to take junior lawyers weeks.
So if your job description reads like a script.
Whether it's a physical script or a digital one, those repeatable tasks are prime candidates for automation, for RPA, for AI platforms. They're getting very sophisticated.
But, okay, there's the other side of this coin. What kinds of roles are more resilient? Where does the human element really matter?
Right, and that's crucial. The roles that lean heavily on human judgment, dealing with ambiguity, making complex strategic decisions, those are harder to automate.
And things involving deep empathy.
Definitely. Machines struggle where there isn't clean data or where you need that profound human connection. So think high-level strategic leadership, navigating uncertainty, building trust, inspiring teams.
Or maybe therapy, certain kinds of nursing, social work.
Precisely. Roles that demand high emotional intelligence, the ability to adapt to really nuanced human situations. In those fields, adaptability isn't just a bonus. It's like a core requirement, a career shield almost.
Okay, so the why is clear. We need to adapt. But the language gets fuzzy. Flexibility, adaptability, resilience. People use them interchangeably.
They do, and it causes confusion. Our research really highlighted that they're distinct concepts, almost like a hierarchy.
So let's try to pin them down. Understanding the difference probably helps us practice them better, right?
Absolutely vital. Let's start with flexibility. That's kind of the baseline.
Okay.
It's basically open-mindedness, willingness to adjust. Your project timeline changes, a meeting gets rescheduled. Flexibility is not digging your heels in.
So it's an attitude, an openness to change.
Yeah, exactly. It helps with collaboration, personal growth. It keeps things moving smoothly.
But just being willing doesn't mean you know how to change effectively.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's where adaptability comes in. It's more than just willingness. It's the actual capacity to learn from that unexpected thing,
Okay.
to integrate the new information, and then quickly redesign your strategy or approach to deal with the new reality. Flexibility opens the door, you could say. Adaptability gives you the tools and the know-how to navigate what's on the other side.
It requires active work then. Cognitive effort.
Yes. And then there's adaptive reasoning. That's even more specific.
How so?
Adaptive reasoning is the actual problem-solving strategy you use when you realize the problem itself is changing as you work on it. You have to adjust your thinking process on the fly.
And justify why you shifted.
Right. It involves logical thought, justifying the pivot. It's the real-time decision-making within an adaptable mindset.
Got it. And the last piece, resilience. Where does that fit? Is it just bouncing back?
It's a bit more than just bouncing back. Think of resilience as the emotional engine. It's the strength, the grit, the determination to keep going when adaptation gets tough.
Because trying new things often means hitting obstacles or even failing.
Exactly. When you try to adapt and it doesn't work out perfectly, resilience is what makes you see that failure as data, learn from it, and immediately try another adaptive approach. It's kind of a meta skill that powers the whole adaptation cycle.
That framing is really helpful. It leads nicely into this idea of classical versus adaptive expertise. For so long, the goal was classical expertise, right? The 10,000 hours in one specific thing.
Deep domain knowledge. Yeah, that was the gold standard.
But focusing only on that deep, narrow expertise carries risks now.
It does. Classical expertise is fantastic within its defined domain. The sources use an example, Malik, this expert in die-cast processing.
Okay.
He is incredibly fast, efficient. He knows every pattern, every routine, every possible exception inside out. His memory for typical scenarios in his field is amazing.
So what's the downside?
Rigidity. The very routines that make him efficient can become blinders.
How does deep knowledge lead to being rigid?
Well, the more ingrained your patterns, the harder it is for your brain to even notice when the fundamental rules of the game have changed. That depth can create a kind of cognitive silo.
So when something truly new comes along, like a new technology.
Exactly. The classical expert might struggle. Their perfected processes might suddenly be useless, or even a liability. They might feel overwhelmed, maybe even burn out, because they're trying to force the old ways onto a new reality. They're focused on perfecting performance within known limits.
It sounds stressful, trying to preserve the past when the future's knocking. So adaptive expertise is the contrast, working across domains, learning new ones quickly.
Precisely. We loved the metaphor used in the research. Visualize a spider drawing from the silk within itself to cast connections into new and often changing terrain.
I like that. The silk is the core learning ability.
Right, the meta-cognition, the learning strategies, and the new terrain is whatever unknown challenge or domain comes along. The adaptive expert is always looking outward, building bridges, connecting ideas from different fields, preparing for the unexpected.
So their goal isn't just having knowledge.
No, it's constantly acquiring and integrating new knowledge. Their whole mindset is different. Failure, errors, that's not a performance setback for them.
It's data.
It's essential data for improving their process of learning and adapting. They're more interested in refining how they learn than achieving a perfect static result. They know the learning gained from a stumble is often more valuable long-term than just repeating something they've already mastered.
Okay. That idea of failure as data brings us right to the absolute bedrock of all this mindset. You mentioned it earlier. It seems impossible to be truly adaptive if you're stuck in a fixed mindset.
Mindset really is the starting point. It's the precursor. If you notice tendencies in yourself like giving up quickly when things get hard.
Or seeing effort as pointless. Like, if I have to try this hard, I must not be good at it.
Exactly. Or avoiding feedback, maybe feeling defensive about criticism, or even feeling threatened when others succeed. Those are strong indicators of a fixed mindset. You get stuck in a reactive loop, often dwelling on past failures.
Whereas the growth mindset, that seems to create the psychological room needed for adaptation.
It completely flips the perspective. Someone with a growth mindset tends to embrace challenges. They see obstacles as opportunities to learn. They persist.
And effort isn't a sign of weakness.
No, Effort is seen as the path to mastery. They actively seek out feedback, even criticism, because it's diagnostic. It helps them improve. We even found this interesting sort of mathematical way to frame it.
Oh, yeah.
Resilience equals reflective thinking, which is the growth mindset, minus reactive thinking, the fixed mindset.
Huh. So you boost resilience by dialing down that reactive fixed thinking.
Precisely. Minimize the noise from the fixed mindset.
Speaking of noise, that internal chatter, the voice in your head, mental agility seems to start with just noticing what that voice is saying. Self-awareness.
That might be the hardest part, honestly, tuning into that inner conversation. And if it's consistently negative,
Yeah.
telling you why you can't adapt, why change is too risky, why you'll probably fail.
It can feel overwhelming.
It can. But the crucial first step is realizing you have the power to change your relationship with that voice. You don't have to believe everything it says. You're not its victim.
I remember one source described those negative thought patterns almost like an internal bully. And bullies, they often have predictable tactics.
They absolutely do. It's often the same fears, the same criticisms, repeated over and over. Once you start to recognize that pattern, see its repetitive nature, it's hard to unsee it.
And that recognition creates a bit of distance.
Exactly. Distance. Without that distance, your mind can feel really boxed in, almost claustrophobic. So the goal here for mental agility is making that active, ongoing choice for flexibility, for openness, instead of letting that internal rigidity take over.
And that choice opens up possibilities.
Yeah, leads to unexpected paths, often more fulfillment too.
Okay, so making that active choice involves understanding how we learn and adapt. This brings us to a really key distinction. Single loop versus double loop learning. This seems fundamental.
It really is. It separates, say, fixing a recurring small error from fundamentally rethinking the entire process that causes the error.
So single loop, that's the default mode for most of us.
Usually, yes. In organizations and individually. You spot an error, something didn't go as planned. Single loop learning is about applying a quick fix to get back to how things should be, based on the existing rules, assumptions, or goals.
The classic example is the thermostat, right?
Perfect analogy. The thermostat is set to, say, 69 degrees. If the temperature drops, it turns the heat on. If it goes above, it turns it off. It maintains the status quo.
It does its job based on the preset goal.
Right. It never stops to ask, hey, is 69 degrees actually the right temperature? Should we maybe aim for 72 or consider insulation? It just corrects the action based on the existing goal.
But double loop learning, that's where the real adaptive magic happens. It forces you to question the foundations.
Precisely. Double loop learning demands you challenge the underlying assumptions, the goals, the norms, the very framework that led to the action in the first place.
So going back to the thermostat, double loop would be asking, why 69 degrees?
Exactly. Is comfort the only goal? What about energy efficiency? What about seasonal changes? It questions the goal itself. In a business context, if a product launch fails, single loop might say, let's fix the marketing message.
Okay.
Double loop asks, wait, why did we assume this market wanted this product at all? Were our fundamental beliefs about the customer need flawed? It digs deeper, questioning the why behind the what. It accepts that sometimes the problem isn't the execution, but the entire premise.
That's a huge mental shift. From just correcting to fundamentally reevaluating.
Yeah.
And doing this requires, what was the term? Meta-cognitive self-regulation. Thinking about your thinking.
Yes. Meta-cognition is crucial. Self-regulation here means actively managing your own thought processes. It involves sort of three main things: planning how you'll think, monitoring your thinking as it happens, and then evaluating how well your thinking worked.
You get an example.
Sure. Before tackling a complex new project, someone practicing this might consciously plan their approach. They'd think, okay, what do I already know? What are my knowledge gaps? How much mental effort will this likely take? Where might I get stuck?
So planning the thinking itself and monitoring during the task.
That's about staying aware, asking yourself, am I getting distracted easily? Am I avoiding the really tough part of this problem because it makes me anxious? Noticing that procrastination might be linked to stress? That's managing the emotions that influence your thinking. That's self-regulation.
So you're focused on the task, but also on how you're tackling the task, becoming a better learner.
Exactly. You're managing your own cognitive resources more effectively. It's a dual focus.
Okay, we've laid the groundwork, the mindset, the learning loops. Now let's get practical. What are some concrete tools people can use to actually build this adaptive muscle? Tool number one you mentioned, the scenario sprint, which uses negative visualization. That sounds a bit counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? But mental rehearsal itself is pretty standard in high-performance fields.
Right. Athletes, surgeons, they visualize success.
They do. It improves performance, readiness, confidence. But the twist for adaptation is that just visualizing smooth sailing isn't enough. You have to incorporate the bumps.
So deliberately think about what could go wrong.
That's the core of negative visualization as a tool here. It's structured. First, you systematically brainstorm potential obstacles, not just casually, but really try to anticipate setbacks, curveballs, things that could derail your plan. What are the failure modes?
Okay, make a list of the bad stuff. Then what?
Then you mentally rehearse. You visualize yourself performing, but you intentionally insert one of those obstacles into the scenario. And critically, you then rehearse your ideal, constructive response to that specific obstacle.
How is this different from just worrying or ruminating on failure? That can be paralyzing.
Great question. That's the key distinction. Rumination is getting stuck in the negative feeling, looping on the fear without a path forward. Negative visualization, used adaptively, forces you to generate and rehearse a solution or a specific action for each negative scenario.
Ah, so you're not just dwelling on the problem, you're practicing the response.
Exactly. You're training your brain. So when the unexpected does happen, maybe the projector dies during your big presentation, your mind doesn't default to panic. It accesses the rehearsed response. Okay, projector's down. Action. Distribute handouts. Switch to verbal delivery. Engage the audience directly. You've built a pre-planned adaptive pathway.
And this isn't just individual. Organizations do this at scale, right? Like the Shell example from the 70s.
That's a classic case of scenario planning. Shell didn't just rely on one forecast, like assuming oil prices would stay stable. They developed several radically different but plausible future stories.
Like, what if there's a major conflict? What if environmental regulations tighten drastically?
Right. They explored critical uncertainties. This forced their strategists to develop plans that were robust enough to work, or at least survive, across a range of possible futures. So when the 1973 oil crisis hit,
Which nobody predicted with certainty.
Shell was mentally prepared.
Yeah.
They had already visited a future like that in their scenarios. They could adapt faster and more effectively than competitors who were caught completely flat-footed.
Okay, powerful tool. Tool number 2, the curiosity compass. Curiosity seems obvious, but how do we make it a systematic practice for adaptation?
Curiosity is the fuel for the adaptive engine. It's that genuine desire to explore, to understand deeper, to connect seemingly unrelated ideas. And why is it so vital now? Well, we saw research where executives worldwide flagged creativity, which is directly fed by curiosity, as the single most important leadership skill needed for navigating rapid change.
If you're not curious, you're basically stuck with what you already know.
Precisely. You're operating within your existing boundaries. Curiosity helps you break out. Specifically, it powers the ideation stage in models like creative problem solving, CPS, Clarify the problem, ideate solutions, develop the best ones, implement.
And ideation needs divergent thinking.
Yes. Divergent thinking is letting your mind wander, explore possibilities way outside the obvious, outside your usual thinking patterns. We often praise analytical thinking, breaking things down logically.
Which is important too.
Absolutely. But for true adaptation, you also need divergent thinking to explore those unknown unknowns. The solutions you can't even imagine yet because you haven't asked the right weird questions.
So how do you practice that? Read about something totally unrelated.
That's a great way. Intentionally expose yourself to ideas from different fields, different cultures, not necessarily looking for a direct solution, but just to spark new connections in your brain. Curiosity pushes you to ask what if and why not, instead of just optimizing what already exists. It helps you find genuinely novel approaches.
Okay, tool 3 involves rethinking feedback. We're used to getting feedback on our results, knowledge of results, or KR. But you're saying that might actually hinder learning sometimes.
It sounds weird, right? But yeah, the research suggests that simple outcome feedback, you succeeded or you failed, can sometimes get in the way, especially when learning complex skills.
How? If I succeed, isn't that good reinforcement?
It is, but here's the catch. If you succeeded using a process that was actually kind of inefficient or clumsy, the positive outcome feedback might just motivate you to keep using that same suboptimal process. You stop searching for better ways because, hey, it worked.
Ah, I see. So I gave a decent presentation, got good feedback, but maybe my preparation was chaotic and stressful. The feedback doesn't push me to fix the preparation process.
Exactly. You might even, as the sources put it, engage in dysfunctional strategy search, tinkering around the edges of your already successful but flawed method instead of seeking a fundamentally better approach.
So what's the adaptive alternative?
Shift towards seeking future-oriented feedback, or feed forward. Instead of how did I do, the question becomes, based on what you saw, what specific things could I do differently next time to improve my process?
Focus on future actions, not past judgments.
Right. It directs attention to the learning process itself, the meta-task strategies. It's about continuous improvement of the how, not just validation of the what.
And we could do this for ourselves too, using journaling and systems thinking. That sounds complex. Applying systems thinking to my daily life.
It's more accessible than it sounds. You use journaling not just to record events, but to map out the patterns. Specifically, look for reinforcing loops and balancing loops related to your goals or habits.
Okay, break that down. Reinforcing loop.
A reinforcing loop creates exponential growth or decline. Like you start exercising daily. That gives you more energy. More energy makes it easier to exercise, which gives you even more energy. It's a virtuous cycle, amplifying itself. You want to identify and nurture those positive loops.
Makes sense. And a balancing loop.
That's about maintaining stability or equilibrium. Think of your workload. If it gets overwhelmingly high, the stress, the imbalance triggers a response. Maybe you delegate, push back on new tasks, take a break to bring the workload and stress back down to a manageable level. It corrects deviations from a desired state.
So by journaling these loops, I stop seeing things as isolated incidents.
Exactly. You start seeing your life, your habits, your projects as interconnected systems. You see how one action influences another, how small changes can ripple through. It helps you identify leverage points for change and fosters that continuous adaptive improvement mindset naturally.
Okay, let's ground these ideas even more. How do we apply this adaptive toolkit to the big challenges people are facing? Let's start with careers. Industries are changing so fast. How do meta skills help?
Well, a significant study looked at exactly this, what core skills make people adaptable across really different jobs.
Yeah.
They studied social workers, engineers, accountants, quite diverse field.
And they found common threads.
They did. Foundational meta skills that predict career resilience regardless of the specific industry. These are the things you want to cultivate if you want to stay relevant and valuable.
What were the main clusters?
3 key ones emerged. First, problem solving. This isn't just about finding an answer, it's about the quality of thinking. It includes analytical thinking, using evidence, logic, weighing pros and cons rigorously,
Okay.
but also crucially, system thinking. Seeing the interconnections, understanding how changing one part affects the whole system, not solving problems in a vacuum.
Right, seeing the bigger picture. What's the second cluster?
Self-reliance. This is about internal drive and resilience. It combines being determined that grit, persisting through obstacles, and really importantly, framing failures as learning opportunities.
Beats that theme again.
Yeah. And also being adaptable within that determination, knowing when to adjust your goals or your path when you hit a wall or face persistent uncertainty. It's about having that inner strength when the game keeps changing.
And the third cluster?
Core literacies. And the big one here for adaptability is continuous learning. Actively seeking out ways to upgrade your skills and knowledge, being reflective about your performance, and being genuinely responsive to feedback.
So these aren't just nice-to-have skills. They're like a toolkit for navigating career uncertainty.
Exactly. They provide a kind of roadmap for self-assessment and development. If you focus on building these meta skills, you're making yourself more adaptable, more attractive in the job market, whatever your specific role is today.
Okay, another huge challenge. Information overload. We're drowning in data, emails, news. It's stressful, and it impacts our ability to learn, right?
Absolutely. The research is pretty clear. High levels of information overload correlate directly with increased daily stress. And what's worse, when people feel overloaded, especially learners,
They don't cope well.
they tend to fall back on what the studies called evasive and emotional coping strategies. Things like panicking, procrastinating, getting frustrated, maybe blaming the source, instead of using effective cognitive strategies like prioritizing or summarizing.
So the overload triggers a kind of fight or flight, shutting down the learning part of the brain.
Pretty much. The cognitive resources get hijacked by managing the stress and anxiety, which directly undermines learning achievement. It sounds a lot like that reactive fixed mindset response again, doesn't it?
It really does. So what's the adaptive approach here, based on how our brains actually work?
The key seems to lie in understanding the interplay between 2 major brain networks. There's the central executive network, CEN.
That's the outward-focused one.
Yeah.
Handling the task at hand.
Right. Focus, attention control, working memory, dealing with external information. Then there's the default mode network, DMN.
Which is more inward-focused.
Exactly. It's active during rest, mind wandering, self-reflection, thinking about the past or future. Crucially, it's deeply involved in making meaning, integrating new information with existing knowledge.
Okay. Outward focus, CEN. Inward reflection, DMN.
And optimal thinking, learning, and meaning-making seem to depend on these two networks working together, balancing each other. If you're constantly bombarded with external information, you're just hammering the CEN.
And starving the DMN.
Precisely. There's no time or space for that crucial internal processing, integration, and reflection. That imbalance likely contributes heavily to the stress and poor learning outcomes associated with information overload.
So the adaptive solution isn't just try harder to focuses, it's about building in downtime.
Yes. Adaptive learning design, whether for yourself or others, needs to intentionally balance external stimulation, like lectures or reading, with dedicated time and space for intrinsic reflection.
Like scheduled breaks, journaling prompts, even just quiet time.
All of the above, structure in moments for the DMN to do its work. By balancing the input, CEN, with the processing DMN, you create a more stable cognitive environment, leading to less stress, better understanding, and deeper learning.
Okay, final real-world challenge. Strengthening personal resilience,
Well,
especially after a major setback or trauma. You mentioned this earlier.
yes, often significant growth and resilience is triggered by adversity, psychological or physiological pain, maybe a major illness, a job loss, severe workplace conflict.
And the starting point is often that negative reactive thinking.
Exactly. The trauma hits, and the immediate response is often a flood of negative, maybe paralyzing thoughts, reactive thinking. The whole process of building resilience is about systematically moving from that state to a more empowered, reflective thinking state.
And the research outlined a specific model for this, the RCM.
The resilience cognitive model, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It basically maps out a 10-step cognitive restructuring journey. It visualizes moving from side A, the initial trauma, and the reactive thoughts,
Okay.
through side B, which is where the real cognitive work happens, challenging assumptions, exploring choices, building new perspectives, what they call developmental contemplation.
Right.
And finally arriving at side C, which represents sustained resilience, where the new adaptive ways of thinking have become more automatic and integrated.
Those first few steps, getting from side A toward side B, seem critical. What happens there?
Steps 1, 2, and 3 are foundational. Step 1 is acknowledging the trauma, just naming it. Step 2 involves consciously evaluating your current thoughts and choices through a growth mindset lens. Are these thoughts keeping me stuck in the pain, or are they helping me move forward, learn, develop?
Okay, that requires honesty.
It does. And step 3 is about systematically identifying the specific obstacles and stressors that are blocking resilience right now, separating the real roadblocks from just generalized anxiety.
It forces you to move from feeling like a victim of the situation to becoming an investigator of your own response. Did this structured process show real results in clinical settings?
The evidence presented was compelling. They tracked several clients facing severe adversity, a physician who didn't match into his desired residency, an engineer dealing with a divorce and job loss simultaneously, a student traumatized by social rejection.
These are major life blows.
Absolutely. And initially, using a standard measure, the BDI-2, all scored in the severe depression range. We're talking scores like 37, 48, even 53. These indicate very significant distress.
Wow. Those numbers really underscore that this isn't just about feeling better, it's about fundamental mental health.
Totally. But after systematically working through that 10-step RCM process, the results were dramatic. The engineer went from a score of 48 down to 10, the student from 37 down to 14, the physician, who started highest at 53, dropped to 19.
That's incredible, moving them completely out of the severe range.
Right down into the mild or even minimal depression range. It strongly suggests that resilience isn't just something you're born with. It's a cognitive skill set that can be learned and practiced even in the face of profound challenges by intentionally restructuring thought patterns.
That evidence is powerful. It really drives home that this isn't passive. It requires intentional, structured practice. So how do we help listeners make adaptive thinking not just a concept, but a robust everyday habit? How do they move towards becoming that adaptive expert?
Well, one key trait of adaptive experts is that they're always engaged in what's called progressive problem solving. They don't wait for a crisis to practice adapting.
They seek out challenges.
They constantly work right at the edge of their current competence. They find the hardest version of a problem they think they can just about handle. They stretch themselves intentionally. And again, for them, failure isn't failure.
It's just high-quality data.
The best data you can get, never the end of the line.
And to sustain that kind of challenging cognitive work, focus is key. You mentioned deep work earlier.
Yes, because adaptive thinking is demanding. It requires concentration. So practicing deep work sprints can be really effective. These are short, dedicated blocks of time.
No distractions.
Zero distractions, where you intentionally tackle a task that pushes your cognitive limits. Maybe start with just 20 or 30 minutes. Then gradually increase the duration, but more importantly, increase the complexity of the challenge you take on during that focused time. You're building your mental stamina, your ability to sustain adaptive effort.
We also need to consciously practice thinking styles that aren't our natural default, right? If I'm very analytical, I need to force myself to be more experimental sometimes.
Absolutely. It's about cultivating cognitive diversity within your own mind. If your go-to is logic, data, precision, intentionally carve out time to brainstorm wild ideas, explore untested possibilities, think more associatively flex, that experimental or yellow thinking style, as some models call it.
And if I'm more intuitive or relational,
Then maybe you need to intentionally practice structuring your arguments more logically, gathering hard data, analyzing the process flow. By understanding your dominant style and deliberately practicing the others, you break down your own internal silos. Your adaptive responses become much richer and more comprehensive.
okay, we've covered a lot from the job market to brain science to practical tools. What's the final takeaway, the core message for someone wanting to build an adaptive future?
I think the synthesis is really about shifting from reaction to anticipatory engagement. It means committing to lifelong learning as a non-negotiable. It means constantly challenging your own assumptions, using that double-loop thinking routinely, and actively seeking out diverse perspectives, especially ones that might make you uncomfortable or contradict your current views.
Because the future is uncertain, and it won't wait for us to feel ready.
Exactly. It's arriving whether we like it or not.
And that imagine if exercise seems like a great tool for that long-term preparation.
It really pushes you beyond just incremental thinking. Don't just ask, what if sales drop 5%? Ask the revolutionary questions. What if the core technology of my industry becomes obsolete overnight due to an AI breakthrough? What skills would I need then? Where could I pivot entirely?
It forces genuine foresight, not just extrapolation.
Right. It helps you prepare for the kind of macro shifts that can completely blindside people who are only focused on the immediate next step.
So adaptive thinking isn't just a survival skill. It's the pathway to actually thriving in complexity. It's about using metacognition, using tools like scenario sprints and double-loop learning to constantly reinvent and refine ourselves.
And maybe we can leave listeners with one final image, a thought from Buckminster Fuller. He talked about the trim tab.
Ah, yes, the trim tab.
You know, it's a tiny, tiny rudder on the edge of the main rudder of a huge ship.
Seems insignificant, but it has huge leverage.
Exactly. It takes almost no effort to turn the trim tab, but because of its position and the hydrodynamics, that tiny movement creates pressure that helps turn the massive main rudder, which then turns the entire ship.
So the small thing directs the big thing.
Precisely. Fuller's point was that an individual acting strategically and consistently with the right leverage can be like a trim tab. Your small, consistent efforts in practicing adaptive thinking, challenging assumptions, running mental scenarios, seeking feedback, these are your trim tab moments. They might feel small day to day, but cumulatively, they can shift the entire direction of your life, your career, even when the world feels overwhelmingly large and resistant to change.
You don't need a giant push. You need smart, consistent, adaptive adjustments.
Be the trim tab.
A powerful thought to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.